Okay, the last part of this lesson is just a few more problems practicing what we learned on the other side, using some implicit differentiation, but we're also going to just skip and use the rules from the last page as well. So if I can, I'm going to try to put these in the screen so that you can see it. Let's see if I can do this well. It may not work. Okay. So here are our pieces, and I want you to find y prime of y arcsine x plus x square root of 1 minus x squared. So hopefully you notice that we are going to need the product rule right here. But now we've got a new rule for this part, so I don't have to go through all of those steps I did on example number 4. So if you were still struggling with implicit, we get a lot more practice with this lesson. So arcsine, using our table, this is just x, so our u is just going to become, u prime is just going to become 1. So I have 1 over 1 minus the x squared. And now I have to do the product rule on this. So that x just becomes a 1. Add it, leave the x. And the derivative of the square root is 1/2. 1 minus x squared to the negative half times the inside, which is just going to be a negative 2x. Watch your parentheses so it doesn't look like you're subtracting. Okay. Move that out of the way so you can see this now. All right, and then it's about simplifying. So there's a lot going on here, but it's going to simplify down relatively quickly. This is just 1 minus x squared. And all of this, if you notice, is going to have a 2 cancel out. The x's combined to be x squared, and this goes to the bottom. So I end up with a negative x squared all over the square root of 1 minus x squared. So these two terms can combine, and I have the square root of 1 minus x squared plus and here's the trick. Do you notice these are the same thing? This basically has an exponent of 1. This has an exponent of 1/2. So what I essentially have is 1 minus x squared plus square root of 1 minus x squared, because these exponents subtract to leave me with 1/2. So my final answer is just 2 times the square root of 1 minus x squared. So don't just all of a sudden think because of the product rule, it's going to be really crazy. I didn't even need to factor out a negative exponent on this one. It wouldn't have hurt to have done it, but I didn't necessarily need to. So you may find some of that with the trig, that things will take care of themselves. Okay. Some of our problems aren't going to be super long. This next one isn't super long. I'm just asking you to differentiate y equals arctangent 3x. It's a pretty straightforward one that matches this. But I do have a u this time. That's why I picked this problem, okay? So arctangent is going to be the derivative of u, and the u in this case is the 3x, which means u prime is just 3. Now you don't have to write this out to the side. This is just me trying to help you out so you can see the pieces. And so what we can take is we can say the 3 goes on top, so you always just take the derivative of the inside all over 1 plus that whole inside part squared. Don't leave it like that. Go ahead and simplify it down so that we have 9x squared. And that's your final answer. Okay. And then our last one, if I can get you in here, is arc cosine. So if you look at what arc cosine is right here, okay? And so I'm gonna have the negative u prime over the square root of 1 minus u squared. Well, I do have a u this time, right? So u is equal to x to the 1/2. So if that helps you think about it, if you need to separate it out, you can. So we can figure out what u prime is. So I'm going to show you how I'd like to write them when they get a little more complicated. Okay. So y prime is equal to, we know it's negative on top this time. I know this is going to have a derivative that's going to be a fraction. U prime is going to be 1/2 x to the negative 1/2, and that's a lot. So rather than put it on top, I'm going to leave the 1 on top and treat this like the chain rule that it really is. All of these functions have just simplified the chain rule, which would have been 1 over times u prime, and written it as one fraction. So I'm going to go back out and extend this and say that the negative 1 over 1 minus the whole thing squared times the derivative of the inside part. And the inside part is just the square root of x. So times that 1/2 x to the negative 1/2. I like doing it that way because then I can see that the 2 goes on the bottom. I flip the negative 1/2 over and it becomes a fraction. So what I really am dealing with is 1 minus x, because those cancel, times 1 over 2 times the square root of x. So this can be written as one fraction. And then since both of these have the same square root, this can actually be simplified, and that x can be distributed through. The 2 cannot, and it becomes x minus x squared. Now sometimes you may also see it written like this with 2 square root of x times 1 minus x. That's fine too, but we usually do put it under the same square root. Okay? So a lot of this is just memorizing those formulas and practicing with them. At this point, you should be familiar with all of the differentiation rules that you see on page 179. So take a look at that page, see what looks familiar. A couple of them are new today, but anything on that page is fair game moving forward, okay? Basically, you've learned all the rules after this lesson, and we're gonna start applying them moving forward. So there's the good news. You've kind of learned the rules that there are to know. Now, on your homework, I have 2 things. I'm going to let you skip, because we're not spending nearly as much time with this stuff. I'm going to let you skip number 7. Okay, you do not need to do number 3. Sorry, I'm going to let you skip number 3 and number 7. You still need to do number 1, okay, because I want you to practice with this stuff a little bit. Here's the tip. It gives you an A. A is equal to your y value. You need to plug that in and find A. Okay, so it's kind of giving you an inverse. If you see it has F inverse of A. So that is your y value. Why they use A and not a y, I'm not sure, but they do A. So you have A, you have the y. You need to plug it in and figure out what the x would be so that you have your point. Okay, so there's my tip on getting started on number 1. Other than that, most of them are going to be the trig rule questions. All right, I'll be at school, so if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email.